Hey guys, and welcome back to 16 States of Soccer, where your hosts Hunter
Simon.
And Stefan.
Today, we want to go over match day 3 and then give you a little bit of history about Union Berlin and Hertha Berlin. Because, as our German listeners will know, Saturday was Germany's reunification day. So let's go ahead and crack those beers and get into match day 3. So we're going to start in the second Bundesliga with the Sandhausen versus St. Pauli game.
For those guys who don't know where Sandhausen is located, it's in the county called Baden-Württemberg. It's in Germany you have two big fat-ass counties in the south, and it's Bavaria, and the next one is Baden-Württemberg.
It's like in the US where everything is bigger in Texas, everything is bigger in Baden-Württemberg and Bayern, Bavaria, right?
Yeah, including the beers.
But we like to brag that Bavaria has a bigger one than Baden-Württemberg, but let's stop here.
So Sandhausen beat St. Pauli 1-0. And what I think's crazy about this is that St. Pauli took 23 shots at the goal but didn't land a single one.
And they even had more ball possession.
Yeah, they had 57% possession with 416 shots. 416 passes.
So with the shots that actually weren't transformed into goals, they're even worse than Freiburg last week. And you actually talked shit about me because I wanted to mention it, and now you're mentioning that. Yeah.
Yeah, and Sandhausen only took 10 shots, landed one of them.
And the worst thing for our new hero, Robin Himmelmann, you listeners already know that we had an interview in the last episodes.
Go listen to it.
And he managed to get all the balls which are coming to his goal. But the main goal, this one goal for Sandhausen, it was an own goal from one of his own players.
You heard Simon saying that he's our new hero. All of us fell a little bit in love with him and with the team. I always fear that next season on our cover, all three of us will have St. Pauli jerseys, but let's wait for what will happen there. Nevertheless, even if Robin Himmelmann is a small hero for us now, if we look at away games for St. Pauli, including this match, it was the 581st day without an away win for St. Pauli.
Yeah. I don't know, man. They're off to a great start this season. They've won every home game. They tied the first game, won the second one.
Yeah, but everybody actually is always talking about, does not having fans in the stadium influence the players on the field? But if you look at stats like that, where you clearly skyrocket at home and don't perform as well away, maybe there is something to it that fans can actually push you. I think Robin Himmelmann also said something about that, but you have to listen to our interview episode for that.
So bottom line is we are really excited about the next game, because next game is St. Pauli versus 1. FC Nürnberg, which is our home club. And yes, maybe we have something coming up with the 1. FC Nürnberg in the next episodes.
Yep, so now we're going to move on to the Würzburg versus Fürth game, or Firth for English speakers.
That is the Franconian Derby. If you're wondering what Franconia is, Bavaria split into 7 smaller regions. Franconia is the one that is traditionally called to be a more rural and a rougher one. So there's even like a term, Franconian friendliness, because people actually tend to be really rough and you have to get to know them a little bit until they start to get friendly with you. Right?
But if you dive deep into the history, you might find the reason why France is called France, and it has a connection to Franconia. So we were very successful in the medieval times.
Actually, who was successful was Charlemagne, who had a really huge empire, and one border was France and one border was Franconia. But the only thing we have in common is actually the name, because we don't have too much in common culture-wise with France. So as we are the rough rural rednecks, and France is known for being pretty sophisticated.
And wine drinking, and we are beer drinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Simon and Stefan are from Franconia, and I'm from a region, well, not from, but I live in a region called the Oberpfalz, which is the least populated part of Bavaria.
The shitty thing, if you want to talk about Franconia, is that Franconia by itself is a border region religiously between Catholics and Protestants, but also a border region between wine and beer producing communities. And the game actually was Würzburg against Fürth. Fürth is part of the beer producing part of Franconia, and Würzburg is part of the wine producing part of Franconia. So actually, it's a cultural battle too here.
Yes, Würzburg, very beautiful city. If you have the chance, go to Würzburg. It's like located in kind of a bowl, and all the surroundings are wine hills.
Yeah, there's a really big palace in Würzburg as well. It's really nice.
Or you go to real Franconia and drink beer and get into brawls in front of pubs. But let us stay away from culture and go to soccer. So what happens in the game?
So it was a 2-2 tie at home for Würzburg and Fürth. Würzburg actually scored their second goal with a penalty because while they were in the box, one of the defensive players fell on the leg of the Würzburg attacker, Dominik Baumann. And so they got a penalty, scored, but then Fürth actually came back with like 30 seconds left in added time at the 90+2 minute and scored to tie the game.
I think what was pretty devastating is that the first goal actually happened in minute 2. So Würzburg scored here, and I think it always blows in your face if someone scores the first minutes, then a lot of your drive is out. And I got a feeling even the few fans that were allowed into the stadium actually were devastated.
And Würzburg really would have needed this first win because they started with 2 losses in a row, and this was the first chance where they might actually win a game, and they missed it in the second minute and additional time.
Yeah, like we said last episode, Würzburg just got promoted from the 3rd league to the 2nd league. And like we were saying, I just don't think they belong yet. They just can't compete that well with the 2nd league teams because, like we said, the 2nd league is quality-wise a lot better than the 3rd league. And they don't have the funding yet to buy the players and programs they need to fit into the 2nd league.
I think that's enough for that game. You got a lot of German culture here now with our Franconian experience, but let's go on to the next game.
And the next game, we already are in the 1st league. It's about Leipzig versus Schalke, and to our loyal listeners, you already know a lot about Schalke 04 and how they are in a big crisis. And the crisis even deepened in this match day. They lost against Leipzig 4-0. So it was again a devastating loss, a disaster for Schalke 04. And they changed the coach during this week. They got a new coach. It was Manuel Baum. He's not a very famous coach, but he was a former coach of Augsburg. So it more like the strategic guy and not the famous one, the big motivator or the glamorous one. So I think we might see that it's not all about the coach regarding to Schalke. Maybe the team isn't good enough to compete with the first league teams in the Bundesliga.
Yeah, actually in our group chat we were talking and debating about when should you fire a coach. Is it always the coach's fault if the team is performing poorly? And yeah, these guys actually thought yes. I was like, no, it's like baking a cake. You need the ingredients, otherwise you can't work. So I think you guys, if you stick to your ideology, you actually have to fire the coach now.
Yes, totally.
Yeah, Simon was joking in the group chat that they should fire the coach. But I think it takes more than one game and half a week to restructure a team and get the team going again. So I'd say about halfway through the season, If it's still like this, then yeah, he needs to be fired.
But maybe you should have given the old coach more than
He
2
lost
game
18 games in a row.
days. Okay, right. Point taken. Okay, yeah, I think it's not only the good scorers from the opposing team, but actually the first goal attempt of Schalke was in minute 54, which also says a lot.
Yeah. I mean, a 4-0 loss. Granted, it was at Leipzig's home, but still, Schalke's a really big club. They should have at least scored 1 goal.
1 point you can get out of the game is not only that Schalke's crisis is getting deeper and deeper, but that Leipzig turns out to be one of the big contenders for Bayern Munich for the championship this year. I was really doubtful about how they are going this season, but they are really turning out better than I expected.
They did really good in the Champions League last season as well. They made it farther than BVB did.
What I really loved, I don't know if our listeners from abroad saw that in their broadcasts, but Leipzig here in Germany is known for being a place for a lot of alternative hipster people, and there was one guy actually in the stadium. He had a full beard and he used it as a face mask. I don't know if that is actually good to do so, but it was funny to look at.
He clipped it under his glasses, so that way it stick to his face, and he got a beard mask.
Yeah, but it was funny to see because of that stereotype that there are a lot of hipsters in Leipzig.
Yeah, but a crazy fact, like Leipzig just completely dominated Schalke in this game. The possession was 62% versus 38%, which means, I mean, over 3/4 of the game was played by Leipzig. 596 passes versus 287. I mean, the difference is just, it's crazy.
But as we always know, the first cut is the deepest, and we don't have to talk about stats like that if we saw the Schalke Bayern game. So just stick with that and go to the next game, I would say.
We're actually recording this episode. Bayern hasn't played yet. They play in about an hour.
But I think it's a good idea because you're always babbling on about Bayern, so maybe some listeners get a break from that.
Yeah, you'll get a break this episode.
And we also get a highest power break, but we'll get to that later on.
So I think that's about it for Leipzig versus Schalke. 4-0 for Leipzig, and they just dominated the game.
And right now, if you look at the table, we are 30 minutes before the Bayern game. But if you look at the table, Leipzig is on top. It's at the first place, which is a really cool fact, as it is the reunification day this weekend. And Leipzig is the biggest city in the eastern part of Germany. So in the former eastern part of Germany. So it's maybe a really, really cool sign that the eastern part might catch up with the western part.
Well, it's still East Germany, just not by name now. It's still the eastern part of Germany. So let's move on to the Dortmund versus Freiburg game. It was a home game for BVB, or Dortmund, and they won 4-0. I think the two best players in this game were Haaland and an American named Giovanni Reina. He used to play for New York FC, and now he's at BVB. He got 3 assists, and he is the first 17-year-old in Bundesliga history to do that. And I think it's cool that he's an American, because as I was saying in earlier episodes, it shows that the MLS is getting better, and the players are starting to get more attention from European clubs.
Yes, and one fun fact and one cool thing about this Reina guy is that he's already supposed and known as the new Marco Reus, who is the former, he's the actual captain right now, but he haven't played much this season, and Reina's kind of getting better and better and is already called the new Reus.
And his mom was a U.S. national player. How cool is that? So
Yep, and his dad played for Sunderland.
So it seems like soccer actually flows through his blood and is in every
Yes.
gene.
So it's an exception even in the American Soccer League. So he's just an exceptional family, an exceptional player, an outstanding player. And yeah, we are really looking forward how he's going in the next games.
Yeah, and a quote from him that I really like. So he's eligible to play for the Portuguese, the England, and the Argentinian, as well as the American national teams. And he said he's seen the rumors and all the attention he's getting, but he wants to play for the United States, and it's the only one that he considers because it's his home country, and he wants to play for his home country.
But we shouldn't only look at Reiner alone, but actually connect it with Haaland, or how you pronounce him right. Where is he from?
Norway.
It's Norway, isn't it? Right. So our Viking, and he's got more massive muscular-wise every season. And Reiner and Haaland as a team together, they seem unbreakable. And it's really Haaland is crazy. If he's in front of the net, if he has one chance, he will score. He will score every time. It's like a lunatic. It's crazy.
Viking in front of the goal. He's so ice cold and he scores every time, and that's one of his biggest qualities, I think.
And watching the game too, I really like the chemistry between Haaland and Reina, because if you watch them, they celebrate together, do everything together. It looks like they really get along as players and people. So they have really good chemistry. They're able to read each other really well. Like Reina's really good at getting Haaland the ball right when he needs to.
But even with these outstanding players, do you remember how I just some minutes ago mentioned that you need a lot of good ingredients for a cake? In the first half hour of the game, nothing happened. So all the players have to play good together, not only the outstanding ones. It doesn't matter if you have a crazy Viking in front. You also need your backup to be right at your side.
Yeah, and I think this game was a really good bounce back for BVB from their last game. Going from a loss to a 4-0 win at home.
Yeah,
I think it'll give them the motivation they need to move forward.
There were a lot of talk about how big is the crisis. Is there even a crisis at BVB? And they lost against Augsburg last week. They lost against Bayern Munich during the week at the non-very important Super Cup. And now they won 4-0 against Freiburg. And every doubters, I think, have to rethink about what they are thinking about Borussia Dortmund.
So you seem to know a lot about that. So did you sell your stock in BVB, Simon?
I sold it before the Corona crisis.
Oh no! Yeah, but I had pity with the manager of the other team. Actually, his 100th loss in a Bundesliga game he managed, and to have 100 losses as a manager, I think it's pretty devastating, right? And then if you have the crazy Vikings actually emphasizing that you're losing, it's even harder.
Yeah, definitely. But, I mean, BVB, again, controlled the game. The possession was 63% to 37 with 759 passes versus 385. So it was just a clear domination by BVB. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the Union Berlin game. It was Union Berlin at home versus Mainz with a 4-0 win.
Mainz kind of getting along with Schalke crisis-wise, because I think we have already two teams who are in a big crisis, and that's Schalke and Mainz 05. Very traditional teams, very big teams who are playing a long time in the first league now and really having problems staying here and even get a draw out of a game.
And I think the key player and like the star of the game was Max Kruse. And it seems like Simon is fond of him. Simon, being known as our host in Love with Money, loves Max Kruse for his other hobby. What was it again?
The money.
What was it again? The other hobby Max Kruse had?
He's a poker player.
And is he successful with
He's
that?
very successful. He's one of the best German poker players at all.
What does that mean? Can you
Not very
live
much.
by playing poker
Yes,
by
of course.
itself?
Has he won a lot of money?
Of course. So I don't know how he's doing right now these days. If he's still playing, but he manages to win a lot of tournaments in the last years, and yes, which is a kind of a cool hobby for a soccer player who already earns a lot of money and then has nothing else to do than put the money in poker playing and winning.
I also read that in 2015 he was in a cab in Berlin, and it seemed like 75,000 euro he just had with him because of a poker game just came away, and he actually tried to sue everybody around him because it was his money and it came away, and he got sued by or fined by the Bundesliga because he didn't act professional outside of the field, it seems like.
So cool guy.
But speaking of the field, it was a fairly even match. Possession, passes, runs, everything. I mean, the teams, basically, it was 50-50 down the middle almost. The only major difference is the shots at the target. Union Berlin took more than double the shots. So I think it just shows Union Berlin was the ballsier team. They took every chance they could get, and I mean, look, they got 4-0.
And now I tell you guys something maybe you not even recognized. Max Kruse, we just mentioned him as a key player of the game. He was not even mentioned in the starting 11 by the Swiss manager. So this was a cool kind of bluff he used. And then, boom, he came in and scored like hell. Don't know if that's cool or mean, but I definitely like that tactic.
But speaking of Union Berlin, let's go ahead and move in to the East and West Berlin rivalry. Union Berlin and Hertha. Let's go into their history and culture. Who the hell are these teams?
Let's have a snuff and continue with the historical view.
Yep, so we're going to start with Hertha BSC. Hertha was founded in 1892. Therefore, it's one of the oldest clubs in Germany. It was also a founding member of the German Football Association in Leipzig in 1900.
Yes, and the founding history was kind of, you get remembered to the founding of Schalke 04, which we covered last time. It was a couple of boys who founded the club, but they were too young. They were 16 or 17 years old. They were too young to actually found a club, so they had to find an adult, and they found one, and so they kind of started the club.
Yeah, and in 1930 and 1931, they won the Bundesliga championship.
They won the German trophy 2 times in the 30s, but since then they never won the German title. They ended at the second place. It was 75, 75. But since then they never even managed to get under the top 3 clubs, which is quite unusual because they're the capital club of Germany. And if you look at other countries like England or Spain or France, the capital club is always one of the best teams.
Yeah, so let's go into where they get their name from. One of the founders was actually standing on a steamship with blue and white smokestacks, and it was named Hertha. And he liked the name, so he took it for the club. And Hertha, or Hertha, is actually a misreading of the Germanic goddess for fertility named Nerthos. I guess they misread it, and when they were translating the scripts from ancient Germanic, and they said it as Hertha.
So you all guys, you know where the Hertha comes from, and the BSC is just abbreviation for Berlin Sports Clubs. It was in the 30s, I think, where there was, and in the end of the 20s, there was a big financial crisis in Europe, and the club Hertha, it really struggles having a field, a pitch where they can play. And there was another club, which was the Berlin Sports Club, and they were really wealthy. They had a pitch, and so they kind of merged to have a good soccer club, which was Hertha, and they have just the financial background, so they merged and turned out to be the Berlin Soccer Club.
Yeah, so let's talk about the 1930s.
Okay, let's talk about it.
So the stadium that Hertha now plays in is actually the Olympiastadion, or Olympic Stadium, that the 1936 Nazi Olympics were held in. The picture with Jesse Owens, who is the African-American runner who won the gold medal during these Olympics, you know, the famous photos, you can look them up. it was held in this stadium, and now still to this day, Hertha BSC plays at that stadium.
And it's one of the least stadiums, which is not only a soccer stadium. So if you look at the pictures, they have a blue track around the soccer pitch, and normal athletic tournaments are held there. So it's only, I think, in the first league, it's only the Berlin Stadium which has a track around.
If you're talking about the stadium, actually, I think it's a really good symbol for the unity Hertha thrives for, because this place where the Olympics are held, and the Olympics being a sports competition where people from all over the world compete, is also embodied in the culture of Hertha itself. Because soon we will talk more about Union Berlin, and Union Berlin really represents only one part of this mega city, Berlin. But Hertha tries to be that team for every part of Berlin. Even on their team bus, they have the coat of arms of every Berlin district. So they definitely show this unity in diversity, this idea of we are Berlin, and with the stadium they even show the idea of we are the world.
Yeah, and the clubs still to this day, actually, because of the separation of Berlin while Germany was separated into East and West, the clubs have a friendship because they really want to show that we're one city again, we're one country again, and we want the city to be unified culture-wise and soccer-wise. And the clubs, the fan clubs, had a fan friendship up until 1990 when Germany reunified.
A fan friendship within a city, it's very, very unusual. Let's go to Hamburg or Munich or Madrid or London. You almost everywhere you don't see a fan friendship within a city.
Yeah, usually, I mean, if you have 2 or 3 clubs within a city, the fans usually hate each other because they're the big rivals for each other. And they have entire derby days, which is where the 2 teams play each other. And so for these clubs and fan clubs to have friendships, I think it says a lot about what they're trying to do for the unity of Berlin.
But on the other hand, it's also pretty easy for Hertha. Hertha has the nickname the Old Dame, Alte Dame in German, which actually emphasizes that Hertha is one of the oldest soccer clubs in Germany, right? So they have always been there. So they made their mark on the city too.
But fun fact, it's not one of the biggest clubs. So if you count the members, if you see at the member stats, Hertha Berlin has only 37,000 members. And if compared to Union Berlin, which is sporting-wise the very much smaller club, has almost the same number of members. They have 37,000 as well.
Yeah, and a lot of times if you actually look at Hertha's stadium during games, it's almost never full. There's usually a lot of empty seats versus the Union Berlin games, which are almost always sold out.
So a lot of unusual stuff for capital city clubs.
But speaking of Union Berlin, let's get into their history and culture.
Union Berlin is a pretty special club because it had so much history. There are like myriads of books talking about the history of Union Berlin. And I think most famous in German is like the fight chant they have. It's called Eisern Union, so Iron Union. So why iron? Because people who lived in that area back in the days have been blue-collar workers who made anything with iron. And the nice thing is, Simon just mentioned that there is a fan friendship between Hertha and Union, is that Eisern Union, Iron Union, is the chant for Union Berlin, the GDR, the Eastern team. Nevertheless, also sometimes the West Berlin side, Hertha uses Eisern Berlin instead of Eisern Union, so Iron Berlin, to show even if we have been cut in half by the state, we always have been one city. And I think this is something pretty special to say, okay, we divided by color, we even were divided politically by state, but we are still united by this cause and being this one city. And actually there isn't too much about this Iron Berlin thing etymologically, because it was just a brewer's dry man who stand on the field, and Union Berlin was losing, and then he said, be iron, be like iron, so be strong, guys, and just finish winning. Right, this is where it developed.
Yeah, and you can see it in their fan culture as well. They have a very strong fan following because they're seen as being the working class club, the people's club, and it really shows versus Hertha. I've never been to either stadiums for games, but I've heard that the atmosphere at Union Berlin games is much better than Hertha games. You might know the famous video where the entire fan section lit up flares in the stadium, and so the entire fan section was flares and fire, and they had to shut down the game for 10 minutes.
Actually, the people bleed for the club, and this it did literally because at one point the Football Association said if they want to stay in the regional league, they have to pay like 1.46 or 1.5 million euros. They didn't have the money, so people went and donated blood. They went to the blood drive, took the money they get, and you know when you go to the blood drive, it isn't a huge amount you get, but they bled for the team and spent all the money to the club that it can stay in the regional league. And to bleed for your team, I think, is something really special. But more than that, what Union fans are really proud of is that they built their stadium. A lot of fans put time and effort into building the stadium. Insgesamt, in the end, 140,000 hours of work were put in for free by fans. Think about that. And they did everything in the stadium. So you must have a different idea of visiting a stadium if you know, I'm part of this, I built this is my house.
And speaking of money and effort put into the club, there are some differences you have to admit. Speaking of the money, speaking of the wages, Union Berlin, they spent last year only 26 million on wages, and Hertha Berlin spent 62 million euros on wages. And as we mentioned before, Hertha Berlin, they got a really, really big investor who only in the last 2 years spent 374 million euros into the club, which is a huge, huge difference between Union Berlin and Hertha BSC Berlin. You cannot see it on the pitch until today, but financial-wise, it's a big, big difference between the Western Hertha Berlin and the Eastern Union Berlin.
Yeah, it really shows because they just played for the first time in their entire history in the first league last season. They were promoted. But they're actually doing pretty well this season. They just won 4-0 against Mainz. And for a club that doesn't have nearly as much funding, especially against their big rival Hertha, I think they're doing very well for what they have.
But I think it's pretty fine that they're now in first league because this will draw more fans from everywhere to the stadium. And it's a pretty special one because the stadium is like literally situated in a forest. So you walk through trees to the stadium, which is mind-blowing. And then what is special on it, 3 sides of the stadium are only for standing. So only on one side of the stadium you actually have seating places, which I think makes a lot for the feeling inside the stadium because people standing go louder and crazier.
Yeah, normally you have only the curves where the people are standing, and on the sides they are sitting and you're just watching the game, but the actual fans who are loud are mainly in the curves in normal stadiums.
So normally when you go there it's pretty loud, but sometimes it gets quieter. On the 23rd December each year they sing Christmas carols in there. So Christmas carol singers from all over come there and hold lights or hold candles and sing Christmas carols. Just Google that or look at it on YouTube. You will get goosebumps. And I think this also shows us that the fan culture changed. We started with Union Berlin being an industrial part of the GDR, being like a blue-collar team. And in the 1970s, something changed. We talked a little bit about Pauli being a left-wing politicized team, And in a way, it was the same way with Union Berlin. In Berlin, you had a lot of different soccer teams. One was for the Stasi, the secret service or secret police
It's the secret police.
of
The-
the
the-
GDR. right?
Yeah, the Soviet secret police.
And one was for the army. And they want to say, okay, this is not for the army, this is not for the secret police. This club is for the workers. And
For the Berliners.
right, and in this club, actually, there you had the idea you could voice criticism against socialism. You had punks there, skinheads there, and just people who, while chanting and singing, could say, we want the wall to be down, we don't want this regime. It was not an outspoken anti-GDR or socialism club, but there were voices in there. And funny thing is, from starting out as a workers and anti-socialism club, it changed because since 2010, all the people, all the hipsters, all the young guys, all the yuppies who moved to Berlin, they become not Hertha, but Union Berlin fans because of all that history. So it's a real change from this true Berlin workers to the recently moved people who became fans.
Yeah, you can definitely tell. I don't know about you guys, but no disrespect to Hertha. I just think Union Berlin has a much better culture, better history. Hertha might play better, but I think Union Berlin's getting there.
It's definitely the more historical team. And to end with another wink to our interview episode with Pauli, besides Hertha, other fan friendships FC Union Berlin has is the Schalke. We talked a lot about Schalke. And also with St. Pauli, which makes sense, both of them being more left-winged or progressive, right?
Yeah, it makes sense. But there you go. There's a little history and culture for Hertha BSC and Union Berlin.
So I think we can come to an end and hope that these two clubs we talked about a little bit today, Leipzig and Union Berlin, can show kind of catching up of the eastern part of Germany with the western part of Germany, because we still have a lot of differences economic wise and financial wise, because you look at the regular income of the normal population, it's still that Eastern workers earn almost 20% less than Western workers for the same job. If you have the same gender and the same job experience, you still earn almost 20% less than if you are a Western worker.
It's going to take some time, I think, for East and West Germany to equal out. It's been 30 years and you can still see the difference. Even when you go to East and West Germany, especially Berlin, you can see the difference in the American sector and the Soviet sector. But I think that's our episode.
And either way, West or East Berlin or Germany or somewhere else, stay iron.
Stay iron.
Stay iron. And one thing we forgot, to our loyal listeners, who of you live in Lower Saxony, in Niedersachsen, in Lilienthal?
Yeah, who lives in Lilienthal? We have like 35 listens an episode from there, and we can't figure out who it is because it's a little village.
Just write us an email, write us on Instagram. You will get a shout out and we will meet for a beer.
That's our episode. Don't forget to like and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We are on YouTube now, so you can catch our podcast there. And don't forget to give us 5-star reviews on your favorite platform. All right, we'll see you guys next time on 16 States of Soccer.